Thank you, Will. That's Will Higgins, by the way. We don't often get to recognize him, but thank you very much. Well, good morning, friends. Good morning. I call you friends because I think, above all, that's what we are. Look around this morning. Look around at the people. A lot of people you don't know, some you do. Without any one of us, it would not be the same. It would lack something that's hard to name. But today, I'm going to call it blessing. Now, as we begin, let's also realize this, that our task together, all of us, is to bring something to this day that we alone can provide, to acknowledge that we are each responsible to bring to this morning a sense of blessing. It's not a matter of creating anything, of seeing what's already here, what's always here, that one living presence that makes sense of our scattered lives, that heals the rifts between us and others, and the rifts, oh yes, within ourselves as well. And in that way, to know that the blessing of that one Spirit is always near as our own breath. What I'm doing now is something that's being done and will have been done in literally hundreds of our churches around the world. The lighting of the chalice. Today we light this flame as a reminder of our mission as being one of the lights of this world, in unity with those who came before us, with whom we are a spiritual family. We shall be able to commit to the building of a community of free faith beyond any geographical limits, and especially now, that so many of us are connected through their computers. May we be a shelter to all who need it the most. Why don't we, the motto of this church is what? It's the open door. That's what the newsletter is called. The old picture always showed the doors being thrown wide open. So let's sing about it. Number 126. 126. 126. That was a failure in verbal communication there.
It's my fault.
Oh, come on, I'll take the blame.
126 in the purple book.
126 in the purple book.
The purple book, I didn't read it. Oh, right. 126 in the purple book.
It is good to be together again after a year and a half, and it looks like more of us are getting together, for which, thank God. Literally, thank God. One of my favorite poets is sometimes called a mystical poet, and it's Rainer Maria Rilke, the Austrian poet, who lived in a place in Spain not far from where I lived and did quite a lot of his best work there. During the time he was there, he got into correspondence with a young man who was trying to become a poet, or so he said. And there was an exchange of letters between Rilke and this young man, which after Rilke's death were published under the name Letters to a Young Poet. But I've always felt they apply really to everybody. How should we be able to forget those ancient myths that are at the beginning of all peoples, the myths about dragons that at the last moment turn into princesses? Perhaps all the dragons of our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us once beautiful and brave. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us. So you must not be frightened if a sadness rises up before you larger than any you have ever seen. If a restiveness like light and cloud shadows passes over your hands and over all you do, you must think that something is happening with you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand. It will not let you fall. Why do you want to shut out of your life any uneasiness, any miseries, or any depressions? For after all, you do not know what work these conditions are doing inside you. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. And thank you, Rilke. That gives some substance to our old Unitarian claim of living in the questions. Law, will you sing us a song? Sing us a Christian song?
A Christian?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Here you go.
Thank you. I come to this garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the words I hear coming to mine ear, the ancient one discloses. He walks with me, he talks with me, he tells me how I am his own, and the joys we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks and the birds hush their tune. So sweet is the voice he is giving. That melody he gives to me within my heart is ringing. He walks with me, he talks with me, he tells me how I am his own, and the joys we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in that garden with him, though the night be softly falling. But he bids me go through the voice of woe. To me that voice is calling. He walks with me, he talks with me, he tells me how I am his own, and the joys we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known.
Yeah, we used to sing that one in Presbyterian Sunday school all those many years ago. I love it. Do any of you remember, or do you know Mary Oliver? Mary Oliver was, she died in 2019. She was a very fine poet, often thought of as a poet of nature. Was a all but in name Unitarian. She's claimed by the Unitarian Universalists. And I have had this poem in my mind all week, so I'm going to share it with you now. It's called One. The mosquito is so small, it takes almost nothing to ruin it. Each leaf the same, and the black ant hurrying, so many lives, so many fortunes. Every morning I walk softly with forward glances down to the ponds and through the pine woods. Mushrooms even have but a brief hour before the slug creeps to the feast, before the pine needles hustle down under the bundles of harsh, beneficent rain. How many make up a world? And then I think of that old idea, the singular and the eternal. One cup in which everything is swirled back to the color of the sea and the sky. Imagine it. A shining cup, surely, in the moment in which there is no wind over your shoulder, you stare down into it, and there you are, your own darling face, your own eyes. And then the wind, not thinking of you, just passes by, touching the ant, the mosquito, the leaf. And you know what else? How blue is the sea? How blue is the sky? How blue and tiny and redeemable everything is. Even you, even your eyes, even your imagination. Yep. Mary Oliver. Loved that woman. If she was alive, I'd ask her out. Let's all take a deep breath and relax all our muscles and feel comfortable and really try to feel that we're at home here now. And as we turn inward, let our bodies and our minds grow still. We're gathered here in a room dedicated to seeking. For many years, we and people like us have sat alone and yet together, reaching for the touch of something beyond ourselves, seeking some inner altar upon which to lay our troubles, seeking some sign of joy yet to come, seeking the comfort of acceptance, seeking knowledge of who we are and what it is that we're striving to become. Sometimes our hearts tell us what should be all too obvious to our heads, that however hard we try to make permanence out of the shifting sands of our times, that we are really always changing, growing, increasing, declining, participating, observing. Whatever strategies we propose for unchanging security in the midst of change, something in us insists that our lives and loves are fleeting, are passing. And yet a deeper intuition emerges out of this dread of dissolution and disappearance. It tells us that this too is somehow even dearer to us than those straw houses in which we have hoped to hide, and our most strongly held views we are so determined to protect. Something whispers to us that there is, in the midst of change, a deeper glimpse of permanence, a permanence that has been with us before we took birth, throughout our constantly evolving lives, and that stays with us when we have traveled on. And so now, as we approach the place of our inner altars, let's open our hearts to this promise of eternity, and thereby go together eagerly into the good silence. One Holy Spirit who is constantly sought and yet never absent. We have felt your presence and we are grateful. Let it be that we remember it in all the changing days to come. That's our prayer. So be it. Inshallah. Shalom. Amen. Let's sing. You can stay seated for this one. This would be number 43 in the Purple Book, Gather the Spirits. Long time ago now, although I hate totting up the years like that, I worked for Mennonite Central Committee in East Africa. And they were a very interesting bunch of people. They were extremely, what shall I say, devoted Christians who did not smoke or drink or chew or run with them that do, whose main sort of vice had to do with getting a big bucket of popcorn and watching films on Saturday night. And they were beautiful people, and I loved them. And they had a mascot. And the mascot, his name was Gladly. And it was a bear with crossed eyes. And he was Gladly the cross-eyed bear. And it was particularly interesting to Mennonites, I think. But as I talk now, I titled this sermon, Please Ignore This Sermon. And I want you to help me with this by not thinking about Gladly the cross-eyed bear at all for the next 16 and a half minutes. Deal? Okay, I'll be checking. I'll check on you. It makes me wonder how good we are at ignoring things. I don't know about you, but I often wake up at 5 in the morning before it's late enough to risk getting up and getting out of bed. And I found that I'm terrible at ignoring things. The merest breath of something I prefer not to think about will keep me awake, worrying and tossing and turning. If you're not like that, have a word with me afterwards to see what you can do. I can try to think about something else, and that might work for a few minutes, but I'd soon be back struggling to ignore that thought that just can't wait to take over my whole mind. Anybody else like that? Definitely. Thank you for a few hands I see. The things it's hard to ignore are little things. Missed phone calls. Oh my God, I forgot to call. Yes. Dental appointments. Heating bills. Can't believe I'm being asked to do that. Last week I got a fixed penalty notice. 65 pounds. And you can't stop thinking about that. The big things, paradoxically, are easiest to drive out of our minds, and probably because we actually can't contemplate them. I'll give you an example. God. Okay? Most of us probably don't think about God all that often. If he exists at all, the whole subject seems to be so far out of our reach that it's hard to concentrate, even for a few minutes. When we do, it's usually something that suddenly happens to us, a sudden phone call in the middle of the night, say. Then we might find ourselves dragging him or her out of the darkest corners of our childhood minds to say, oh, God, I hope that's not such and such. In the moment of, for example, an automobile accident, something like this crude prayer would escape our lips, even if we were hardened atheists. But mostly, God is the least noticed, least thought about item in our whole mental repertoire. And why should that be? Think about it. What if there is a God? What if there's a superhuman being or agency that can be contacted, or at least admired from a distance, the mere existence of whom can completely change your life and fortunes? Wouldn't that be amazing? That would be some kind of life-changing event that would make all the difference. But mostly we just think of God as a kind of, possibly as a myth, possibly as something we thought long ago and no longer do. If you're an anthropologist, you trace the origins of belief in God back to cave people, cowering in awe during thunderstorms, the spinning their stories that they spun, making themselves feel better. If you're a psychologist, you might think of God as the archetype of the missing and longed for parent. If you're a neuroscientist, you might be looking with MRIs and electronic probes for some little gland somewhere in your cortex they call the God spot, which will make sense of the gladly the one-eyed bear. Did I say that? Sorry. Make sense of the mystery once and for all. There are philosophers who beg to differ. They say that the mere existence of the myth of God indicates that there must be something about it, some point to it. The concept indicates the reality, because otherwise, where would it come from? Well, the problem, of course, is proof. You can't see God. You can't pop him on a scale and weigh him. And you can't analyze his DNA in the lab. The way of life called positivism, which surrounds science like a cocoon, means that basically, if you can't see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, or smell it, it ain't there. Unlike cross-eyed bears. Sometimes it's possible to notice things you weren't looking for at all. A good example is the planet Neptune. You know about planet Neptune? While observing and trying to predict the orbit of Uranus in 1821, the French astronomer Delambre saw that his calculations weren't working very well. It seemed that something unknown was influencing the motion of the planet. And about these odd results, he said, I leave it to the future, the task of discovering whether the difficulty of reconciling the data is connected with the ancient observations or whether it depends on some foreign and unperceived course which may have been acting upon the planet. So Neptune was never seen, and it was inferred. And I like that phrase, I leave it to the future. It sounds like such a humbling reminder to the positivists that their calculations are only good up to a certain point, where you can weigh and measure and see and hear and all that stuff. It's just up to now. It seems to mean that we can know what we know, but we can never know what it is that we don't know. And so it's been with my life. Has it been that way for you? Every time I thought I had it all sussed out, something has come along and made me realize there are things I hadn't even yet thought about. Things that made my old calculations seem what they were, out of date, which makes me think that all knowing, all theories, all take it to the bank certainties are at best provisional. Or you might just say, they're bunk, really. Because the main point is, you don't know. Cross-eyed bears. Sorry, I was just checking there. The mystical literature of the world's religious traditions are full of the idea that God is everywhere visible, if only you knew how to see. Jesus said that. They said, kingdom of heaven, it's at hand. Basically, you're looking at it. That's intriguing because it seems to imply that there must be some way you can learn the trick of seeing. Put another way, if you learn to stop ignoring God, well, that means that God is the elephant in any room, and maybe more especially this one. So, once again, for benefit of people who may not know me very well, I have to explain what I mean when I say God. Obviously, I don't mean some white-haired old gentleman who lives in the sky, who has a constant need for flattery, and who rules the world with some very peculiar tastes and interests. Doesn't seem to like fun very much. No, I don't also mean some vague cosmic principle that speaks of the recycling of atoms. Somehow supposed to make you feel better. Oh, you're in a cycle and your atoms will become something else. That's never been any comfort to me. I mean something like this, what Muhammad said, God is as near as the neck of your camel. Now that would be something we wouldn't understand because we simply don't have the intellectual equipment. It'd be like hearing a dog whistle. You know it's there. You see Fido's ears pop up. You see him looking around the room. You can't hear anything, but he can. Understanding it wouldn't be the point anyway. I think it's more a case of trusting it, validating it through our actions, and feeling safe in its presence. And once again, I come back to that key word. Yes, that old faithful faith. How do you get faith in something if you can't believe it? Answer that question. At one swoop, you'll fill every pew in every church from here to Jerusalem by next Sunday. The book of Hebrews in the New Testament has got that very simple couple of lines. You've heard them before from me. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. According to that, faith has not much to do with what we think of as belief. It's not a theory. It's not a creed. Faith is more real than belief. Faith is substance and evidence. And if that's true, and I feel it in my bones that it is, there only remains the job of finding the substance and uncovering the evidence. And what's the first step in that process? Stop ignoring it when you see it. It is not a cross-eyed bear. I have some American Sufi friends who every time they look at their wristwatches, they say one of the many names of God. That's how they keep trying to prompt themselves to remember that there's stuff here that is realer than this, that we're inclined to forget about. Are they expecting some kind of response from on high for that? The parting of the clouds? A deep, sonorous voice that says in reply, "You rang?" Clearly not. What they expect is that their attention has been diverted for just a moment from the writhing heap of daily concerns that makes up their lives and focuses them on the thing that they're actually looking for, that they actually most want. And there are plenty of ways to accomplish the same thing. You can have a daily ritual of prayer. You can meditate. Or you can come to church like we do sometimes. And we dedicate 1 hour to come in and be somewhere that isn't where we really want to be in order to prompt ourselves, to remind ourselves that there's something else going on, something much more important. It's a good place to start looking. Have you all heard of a guy look? You know what a guy look is? Okay, a guy look is the way a man looks for something. And I'll give you an example. I go into my kitchen. I'm looking for mayonnaise. I say, "Jilly, where's the mayonnaise?" She says, "It's on the shelf." No, it's not. It's not on the shelf. Yes, it is. I just saw it yesterday. She has to come in and help me out because I was looking for something that had a blue cap and this mayonnaise had a red cap. And I was looking and I couldn't see it. And the reason I couldn't see it was I had an idea in advance what I was looking for. And nothing matched that. So I say, isn't it possible that we do the same thing when we're looking for evidence of that force I call God? Isn't it that we're scanning, like looking for the mayonnaise and not seeing? Doesn't this go a long way to explaining why the scientists can tell us with such glib assurance, well, there's no God. God isn't necessary. Everything you see can be accomplished by gravity. Aren't they just saying, there's no mayonnaise on that shelf? You see, I told you this sermon wasn't about cross-eyed bears. Anyway, feel free to ignore it. That's what we do. Amen. I think we're back. I think we're coming back. I think there's some energy that I haven't been able to detect for a long time that's going to bring us back into church. I saw a guy on TV this morning saying that whereas 15 years ago, only 5% of people in the country went to church, that's gone up to 11%. This is contrary to the way we all think things are going. It's like if we're going to be unreasonable and irrational about politics and the environment and everything else, and we are being irrational about it, why not just go ahead and be irrational about God and go ahead and decide to believe in it? Anyway, it seems like that is happening, and maybe we're reflecting that. Our Rainbows Across Borders African gay refugees are back too. They're rehearsing in the church here. They come in their dribs and drabs to worship with us, but most of them live places like Swindon or Norwich or something. It's very hard for them to get here. But I want you to know that our congregation over the past 8 years, I can hardly believe it's that long, have helped more than 200 people get asylum in this country. You know, we write letters. The main thing we do, and I hope we'll carry on doing it, and I've been told this so many times, is I felt like a person when I came there. I didn't feel like a special case. You know, can you imagine being, in some senses, the wrong color in this country, the wrong sexual orientation, and from the wrong continent, and trying to keep happy? Well, that's what we help them undo, and so good on us. We're not collecting money these days, but we do have a little box out there if you'd like to put some money in to help with the church. And is there anything I should be mentioning? Marjorie's funeral was held on Monday. It was quite a big event. There were quite a lot of people here in the afternoon for that, and all that successfully done. And the flowers that you see starting to go off a bit were from the funeral. No, shall we sing? Let's sing. I love the tune because it's like what I used to have to sing at Christian summer camp. It's number 210 in the Purple Book, When the Song of Life is Ringing. Singing in your And so now we say so long, not goodbye, God willing, that's for another day. But in our separateness, as in our togetherness, may we look after one another. May we really look after one another until we meet again. Amen.